Hey, Steve Riley, welcome to Great Practice, Great Life. This is a special episode for me, for us actually. This is number 100. We've actually had 100 episodes. We've started as a podcast. Now we're on YouTube. Our audience is growing. Things are looking great. But today is really a moment of celebration for me and for us, a conversation about we've made a milestone. We've gotten this far. So I'm really thrilled to be here with you to have a conversation. I was trying to think about how we could talk about 100 episodes. There's so many things that have occurred over 100 episodes. So in short, we've really had 100 hours of really serious thinking. Now, I kind of think of the podcast like a little book. It's a conversation. It's a little piece of hopefully wisdom, experience, and insight. So I thought it'd be interesting to reflect back and learn from 100 great conversations. What are the 10 lessons, the 10 laws, the 10 takeaways that I personally have learned from being in the privileged position of having 100 conversations with some brilliant people? And so I thought about it a lot, and I've distilled it down to 10 really interesting lessons, laws, quite frankly, growth strategies from some brilliant people. So my goal today is to share those with you. Now, to help improve your experience, I brought on the one and the only Valerie Peterson. And I asked Valerie to join me because Valerie, first and foremost, is a great listener. She listens very well. She asks terrific questions, and she kind of gets me. So, of my friends, my colleagues, a couple of them really understand me. And Valerie's one of those special people in my life that gets me. She calls me on my BS. She's tough on me, but at the same time, she's very supportive. So I asked her to come on today to talk together so we all could share these 10 growth strategies that we've learned from 100 people. Now, there's also something special about this episode as well. I asked in a prior episode that if there was a favorite episode that you liked, something that you enjoyed, please send me a shout out. Please send us a shout out. So today I have Kevin Snyder, Jennifer Felten, and Fred Felten sharing with you their 3 shout outs about the podcast, their favorite episodes, whatever they like to share and celebrate as a community. So after Kevin, Jennifer, and Fred share, then Valerie and I will go to work. Now, my guess is at the end of this, you may want a summary of these 10 growth strategies. If so, we're going to put a link in the show notes where you can download those. So don't hesitate to take advantage of that if you want to use those. Now, for all of us, for those of you who started with me with the very first episode to where we're at today, thank you. Thank you for being part of my great life, my great practice. And our whole hope here at Atticus is that this podcast, this conversation, this YouTube show is a way of helping you have a great life and a great practice. I don't care where you're at in your journey. I don't care where you're at in the world. Our whole goal, our whole commitment is to help you have a great practice and great life. So I'm hoping these 10 growth strategies over the past 100 episodes will give you some insight, some help, and maybe some laws or lessons to apply in your great life and great practice. With that, I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, my name is Kevin Snyder, and I am an Atticus member. I've been in Dominate Your Market for the last 2 years and been part of the Atticus family for the last 5. I've been an avid listener of Steve's podcast since its inception, really. Can't say that I've listened to every episode, but I've listened to a number. And this one I'd like to talk to you about is Bentley Caldwell and the Elevate Your Brand. What I've really liked about this episode is this focus on confidence, and confidence through how we view ourselves. And how we view ourselves is in the mirror oftentimes, and how we dress and how we feel is tied to how we dress and what we look like. And when we're feeling really, really good, when a brand new suit, for example, clothes are fitting well, shoes are shiny, and I can't tell you how much this episode resonated with me in this idea of confidence. I think about it when I work on the business. If it might be a day I'm not going into the office, but I still want to get dressed up. I think differently when I'm dressed up. I think more sharply. I think more business-mindedly. I think more professionally than I do when I'm lounging around in some shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. Just like when I'm dressed in my workout clothes, I think more performance. Sometimes I just put on my workout clothes to inspire me to work out because I'm getting into that mindset. You look sharp play sharp. And that's something that I carry forward to our kids when I used to be their coach in sports, mostly soccer when they were younger. And I always had the kids tuck in their jerseys before the game. We were talking about kids playing in AYSO and sizes and uniforms that were too big and looked like they'd be wearing small dresses. So not only did the clothes inhibit the play, but it was the concept of me that you need to look your absolute best when you're playing. I don't care if you're 9 years old or if you're 19 or you're 29 and you're playing in the Premier League. You are looking sharp, have pride in yourself and pride in your team, and that you're going to play that way. So that transcends to work. And that's making sure that you're going out looking your best all the time, whether you're sitting in a coffee shop, you're going to be going to a speaking event, or you're meeting clients in the office. You're going to look your absolute best. Now, what I've had to learn and what Bentley Caldwell kind of hit home is that everyone has a different personal style. Early in my career, what I was trying to do was I was trying to match somebody else's style that would work for them. Criminal defense attorneys, I saw this, would dress a certain way. They look really extra sharp. And so there's this connection in the mind. They must be making a lot of money in order to afford that dress. And if they're making a lot of money, that must mean they're doing really well. Never mind the fact there was never that connection that the amount of money that a criminal defense attorney made had no correlation to their success in the courtroom. There's a correlation to their success as a salesperson. They were able to get the business. So that personal style is like, you don't have to emulate somebody else. Find your style and dress sharp within that style for you. What I will say is that I had no concept of how clothes looked on me. I'm not a very large statured individual, 5'6", back then 5'7". I shrunk an inch over the years, but I was wearing clothes that were just way too big on me, and I had no concept of that. I really wasn't caring. I knew that I had to wear a suit. I was wearing a suit. So Bentley Caldwell really, really resonated with me in these messages that really boiled down to knowing your personal style and then dressing really well so you look sharp, play sharp. So thank you, Steve, for bringing this home and reminding me of the importance of all of that. And also, lastly, bringing that resource to the table. That's what makes this podcast so great, is that it's so accessible. The messages are resonating. They're right there. They're tangible. You sit there and you go, aha, yes, that's right. I understand. And now I got somebody I can talk to, I can reach out to, a real life person that's very accessible. And so really, really appreciate you, Steve Riley, and the Atticus family for hosting this and doing this and really making excellence a lot more achievable.
Hello, Steve, and everyone at Atticus. Congratulations on your 100th episode of the Great Practice, Great Life podcast. Awesome job. For those who don't know me, my name is Fred. My wife Jennifer and I run a small law firm in Southern California named Riley APC. We're members of the Dominate Your Market, or DYM. We meet on the West Coast, which, as you know, is every 90 days. In between, we do a lot of good stuff, a lot of work. We get basically tired, worn out. The DYM really helps us recharge our batteries, gets us excited for the next 90 days so we can conquer those battles. Every Monday, getting an episode of the podcast is just a little extra juice, a little shot in the arm that really helps us prepare for our week, gets us excited, gets us going. We're in the Pacific time zone, so we get to listen to it before going to the office. Just amazing. Like I said, it gets us really focused for the week ahead. Also listen to each episode, and then I discuss it later with my wife. I'm really learning how to become a better listener, and there's so much more in each episode than just what's on the surface. Outstanding job. Really, really great. But what's my favorite episode? It had to be episode 53. Why? Because that's the one I'm in. Of course, it's going to be my favorite. It was really such an honor that Steve invited Jennifer and me to be in that episode. It was a tremendous experience. I got to learn not only how do you listen to an episode, how do you be on an episode, but there are other episodes I really enjoyed. Stuff from Sam Price or John Tucker, and of course anything from the amazing Patty Paz. She's just such a great job. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Atticus. Thank you so much for your first 100 episodes, and I look forward to the next batch of 100. Thank you.
Thank you to Steve and the team at Atticus for your amazing podcast. Every Monday morning, I wake up excited. I go into my office, I get on my treadmill, I put on my headphones, and I get inspired to be a better person, to be a better business owner, and to have the opportunity to think and grow thanks to the podcast.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hey, Steve Riley, welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Today is a special episode. Today is our 100th episode. So I thought, how could we make this episode special? And I had a conversation with my dear friend and boss, Valerie Peterson, the CEO of Atticus. And I was talking to her about some of the things that I've learned over doing 100 episodes. So today I invited her to come on so we could talk about the things that we've learned and I've learned to share with you as our listeners, members of our communities, the insights that we've gleaned over the past 100 episodes. So with that, Valerie, welcome to the episode.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not taking it over like I did previously, or maybe I will. I guess we'll see. We'll see how you do and whether I really need to step in and, make things hop. I don't know. Remains.
I think it's a foregone conclusion. You're here. You officially have control of the wheel. I think I'm going to do it exactly how you want. I'm just saying. I've seen this show before.
Well, Steve, I do want to congratulate you on the 100th episode. I know how much dedication, work, and time goes into every single episode. So this is no small achievement. Congratulations.
Seriously. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. It's been a labor of love, but I'm not the only one that's really responsible for this. So while the podcast started for me as a gleam in my eye after reading Robert Rose's book, Killing Marketing, and meeting Robert, probably in 2017, 2018, we worked for a couple of years trying to get support for it internally. And then it probably wasn't until we pivoted the positioning of our firm from guiding a practice to Great Practice, Great Life that the story of what the podcast was going to be about, what the center of the podcast, what our focus was going to be, got clarified. And then over a period of time, it took some work to get it launched, and it became more of a community event. And so many people have been involved in it. So while I appreciate the congratulations, there's a ton of people, and a few of which I'm going to do shout outs for in a minute, that have been incredibly involved. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to share 10 things that I've learned and share these with you, Valerie, and have a conversation with you. And I'm inviting the members to think about it from their perspective, because we've had 100 hours of conversations. Some have been longer, some have been faster for a lot of you, but there's 100 hours of conversations that have occurred for those of you that regularly listen to the podcast. So it's really, really been a significant journey. And like you said, a wonderful milestone for us. So thank you. I do have two requests, though. The first request is the support that you've given us as an audience, a member of the community, has been significant. But I do have a request. Considering this is our 100th episode, I would love to have 100 5-star reviews. So I don't care whether you listen on Apple, Spotify, if you're following us on YouTube, which we are now on YouTube, the capability of giving us a 5-star YouTube isn't there. But if you do follow on Apple or Spotify, and we'll put links in the show notes, that if you could just take a minute, if you haven't given us a review, please just jump on there and give us a 5-star review, because it would really mean a lot to us and the whole team behind the podcast if we could break 100 5-star reviews. The second thing is that we also created a goal, because in Atticus, we're all about setting goals and playing for a bigger game. So I have a request as well. If there's one person that you think any of the episodes can make a difference for, please share that episode and encourage them to be part of our podcast audience. Quite frankly, I would love to see 100 new listeners, and I'll talk to you towards the end of the podcast about some statistics that are very interesting about the episodes that we've done. But ultimately, the quality of our community is really defined by the quality of people that are part of our community. So if there's somebody that you think needs to be part of the Atticus community, or at least listen to our episodes, please feel free to share at least one episode to invite that person into the conversation of what a great practice and great life looks like. Valerie, is there anything that you want to say about that?
I'll thank everyone listening in advance for that. We really stand behind wanting every lawyer, every law firm owner, every team member, every loved one of our members to have a great practice and a great life, which is why we are constantly encouraging you. If it's meant something to you, please share it with someone else that you think it may resonate with. And I'm just thanking you in advance for that. Steve, are you ready to jump into your top 10?
I am. So here's lesson number 1. So the first lesson I've learned from doing 100 episodes is strive to make your next performance better than your last. The first couple of podcasts I did were really, really rough. And if I could have some do-overs, I would do those over. But I realized it's kind of like that in life. And those of you that are fans of Carol Dweck's book, mindset, when he discussed the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset, Carol's got this great quote, which is called, "Becoming is better than being." So I really started to think, well, how do I wrap my brain around this and just start to take a position that my next episode after this episode will be better than this episode. So every time I go to an episode, I have to forgive myself for not doing a terrific or as good as I wanted last episode, but just tell myself and have confidence and faith that my next episode will be better than my last. So that's lesson number 1. I know I'm not a natural podcaster. It wasn't something that I said, hey, look, I really want to have a podcast. It was kind of all the leadership team were discussing who should do it. And I kind of was the last guy standing at a really bad game of, what's it called when you run around the chairs? What's it called?
Oh, yes.
Musical chairs. I was the last guy standing in the musical chairs list. So it was just kind of a funny thing where I was like, well, okay. And I'm naturally curious. So I was like, this will be a fun thing for me to talk to people and have conversations with people. But I'm not, you know me well enough, Valerie, I'm not a social creature. I'm not the guy that's going to go to a party just to go to a party. But if I can talk to people I find interesting, it's a wonderful use of my time. I'm naturally curious about a lot of different things in life.
And Steve, I think you're obviously very humble, very self-aware. And I know some of this is a little in jest about being the last person standing, but what you're really doing with your willingness to put yourself out there saying, I'm not a natural podcaster, but this is important, so I'm going to step up and do it. You are embodying what we at Atticus try to teach our members and encourage our members to do. You are really exhibiting how to have that growth mindset.
Thank you. It's something I see among our practice advisors, among our resource advisors, among our team, is that sometimes you got to learn how to do something, and sometimes you end up being the person that has to learn how to do something. So it's been a great experience for me in retrospect.
Sure.
At the beginning, it wasn't a great experience, but now it's a lot more fun. So that's lesson number 1.
All right. So let's move on to number 2. What is lesson number 2?
Kind of intertwines with lesson number 1. So the great thing about doing a podcast or a Great Practice, Great Life show is that we have a audience of perfectionists. And the one thing that I can promise you I get plenty of is feedback on how to be better as a host, how to invite better guests, how to do everything better. In fact, after being married for 31 years, I realized that I'm getting lots of feedback from a lot of different people, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. And sometimes it hurts your feelings. You're like, oh man, geez, I thought that was a good episode. So I really developed lesson number 2 as hearing criticism as coaching for growth. So I had to develop a way of taking any form of criticism and realize that people weren't criticizing me to hurt my feelings. They weren't criticizing us as a community, weren't criticizing all the people working behind the scenes. What they were doing was giving us feedback for how to be better. I had to listen to every form of feedback, not as criticism, but as coaching for growth. Even in our relationship, Valerie, you've given me some very blunt feedback. And that blunt feedback, I have to first, say, "Ooh, God, that stung. That stung a little bit," and then take a step back and say, "Well, this is somebody who cares about me. This is someone who's committed to the same things that I'm committed to. What I need to do is listen to that criticism as coaching for growth and being better or making the podcast better." Does that make sense to you?
It does. And Steve, I've heard you talk about different people who have motivated you or whose stories you found motivating in this vein. And I recall you mentioning Steve Jobs. Do you want to share a little bit about why you thought of him as you were working through this lesson?
But there's a lot of really great people who've done really remarkable things. But when Steve Jobs had founded Apple Computer, there was a point in his career where he got voted out of Apple Computer, the company he founded. He got ousted, and he founded Next Computers and another company that some people might recognize called Pixar. So he went off and started these 2 different companies. And unfortunately for Apple, or fortunately for Apple, the CEO and the leadership team they installed after Jobs was fired. I mean, literally fired from the company he founded, did a terrible job. And they created not one, not two, but like 50 different product lines. They really, really kind of drove the company into the ground because they came from a consumer products background. Like, I believe the guy's name was a former CEO of Pepsi. And what ends up happening is the board realized they made a mistake and they reached back out to Jobs to bring him back on. Now, he's already started Next, he started Pixar, and he clearly loved Apple, but he could have easily said, thank you, but no. Financially, he's well off. He didn't need the money, but he still believed in the vision. And he took the negative feedback that he'd gotten from the board when he was fired as president and came back on with an invigorated vision of how to make Apple a better company, a better brand. And he took the feedback, not from the perspective of, hey, heck with you guys, but took the feedback saying, okay, there's something for me to learn here, how I can come back and be a better leader, a better visionary, and really laid the groundwork for what Apple is today from that experience. So I always kind of take it from the perspective that people that care about you, people that care about your mission, whether it's a client of your law firm, whether it's a team member in your law firm, whether it's the brand new person who's working in your law firm, they give you some feedback. Sometimes, I know I've heard it as criticism and I get upset, but I really try and pay attention to, well, maybe they're just trying to help me. And what they see is something I don't see. So instead of being a arrogant jerk, which I have a tendency to be when I get offended, instead I go, okay, great. This is somebody who cares about me, cares about what I'm doing, and they're trying to teach me something. I just can't see it or hear it. And hence I have to take a step back forth and say, okay, this is really not criticism. This is actually coaching for me to be better at what I'm trying to do in my great practice, my great life. I don't know. Does that communicate for you?
It does. Absolutely. Anything else you want to add to lesson 2 before we move on to number 3?
No, lesson 3. Let's do lesson 3. Thank you, Valerie. This is the funnest thing that I've learned in life, but I've also learned from doing the podcast. So lesson 3 is learn from everyone by tuning into their unique perspective. Now, everyone that's joined and been part of our podcast has come from either inside the Atticus community or outside the community, right? The bulk have been inside the community. And sometimes as lawyers, we miss really great insights. We miss really great lessons. And so, for example, Patty Paz, who's one of our fantastic adjunct prax advisors, who's also one of the instructors for the team leader program, been on here 3 or 4 times. And people sometimes, I would say the common lawyer would ignore somebody like Patty because she's not a lawyer. But Patty's insights and her ability to think and communicate about how she sees the world as a leader inside the law firm is phenomenally important. We just had Carla Johnson, we've had Robert Rose, we've had Megan Hunter, who all are people outside the Atticus community that have brought us a different perspective. So one of the incredible things for me is that every time I do an episode, every time I listen to a guest, I walk away stunned by the insights that they bring, everything from practical tips to the difficult times they've had in their life. And there's some people that have been on this podcast have shared from their heart when they were at the lowest moments of their life, whether it's depression, burnout, on the verge of bankruptcy, and they've really turned their practice and turned their life around. So I just really encourage everybody, as you listen to each episode, don't listen from the perspective that you know this already, but listen from the perspective that someone is giving you a very unique perspective on their life. The one thing I learned from you, you remember the podcast you did with me, the 10 things I learned as a CEO that I wish I knew as a lawyer? You remember that one?
I do.
One of the lessons you had there is, take the call, respond to the email. And I have to tell you, that's one of the problems I sometimes have when I get a lead. I usually turn it over to the sales team. If I get a complaint, I usually turn it over to somebody else because I'm trying to get myself out of a managerial role in certain things, certain roles I've played in the company. But that lesson was a great lesson for me because sometimes I get that complaint email. Instead of avoiding it, I pick up the phone or the Zoom and call somebody, or I just deal with it at that moment. And consequently, it's been a really, really great thing. It's been a great takeaway for me. So thank you for that. But it's one of the things I really think that this medium, this ability to have conversations with our community, gives us the capability of taking someone's view of the world and twisting it like a multi-dimensional diamond and seeing things from a completely different perspective that gives us great insight and great power.
So, Steve, you do obviously some specialized, personalized coaching as well as lead group programs for us. How has this lesson in particular impacted you as a coach and as a facilitator in working with other law firms and their team members?
I hope it's made me a better listener. I hope it's made me more empathetic and understanding. I hope it's made me more patient. Now, from a scale of 1 to 100, I might have scored a 1 or 2 on the patience scale. I might be up to a 20 or 25 now. There's more work to do. But people bring different issues in their life. And sometimes they can't see what's upstream causing the pain, causing the problem. Sometimes what they need to know is that you hear what they have to say, you understand what they have to say, and you're there to help them move beyond whatever the issue is that's holding them in place. So some of the things like what Megan Hunter talked about diffusing conflict, how Carla Johnson talked about thinking as an innovator, how our team leaders have talked about everything from how to improve communication or their own journeys. It gives me insights and it helps me, I think, to be a better coach and a better human being. I just, every episode I've learned something very, very powerful. It's amazing as I look back, while I've done the work of 100 episodes with other people, the rate of return I've got from wisdom, insight, and just life lessons has been extraordinary.
All right. I think we're on to number 4, or fourth lesson.
Lesson 4, turn pain into progress by learning from every challenge. One of the fascinating things is you listen to each episode, especially some of the members' episodes, and I don't care team lead, I don't care who they are, I don't care where they're at. We've had public officials on the podcast and they've shared their journeys and what it's taken for them to get where they're at. Each one has taken a life challenge and turned it for opportunity for growth. So at the time, the life challenge doesn't really, really work well, but ultimately the life challenge makes you a better leader, better human being, better everything. And the two things that I think hit me the most on this is that, I had a really great privilege of going with my family to London. When we were in London, we went to the Churchill War Museum. And this is where, under one of the government buildings, Churchill and the British government operated to avoid bombs as they were bombing London, like the German bombs. They were trying to figure out how to protect themselves. And they took over this really sturdy basement, for lack of a better word. It wasn't a pretty scene. It wasn't very fancy. It was just basically they were operating out of this basement to try and have a place to operate in case their primary headquarters were bombed. And I was sitting there looking at pictures of Churchill. And right before World War II, Churchill was a washed up politician. He was 65 years of age. He was considered a crazy man by a lot of people in the media and a crazy man by a lot of politicians because he was adamantly opposed to Adolf Hitler and adamantly opposed to the growth of Nazism and adamantly opposed to any form of appeasement with Germany. And ultimately, his refusal to appease Germany put him in the position of being a prime minister and leading London, and if not the rest of the world, in a very valiant fight against Nazi Germany. What's amazing is he was 65 and he was considered washed up. And after that, his leadership, his incredible skills as a politician, as a speechwriter, were so extraordinary that he mobilized. Somebody said he did not mobilize England, he mobilized the English language. And he did an amazing stand at a point in time where most people considered him washed up. He got voted out after World War II, which is entertaining, but he continued to write and speak until his early 90s, which is pretty remarkable considering his diet of whiskey, cigars, and, really unhealthy food. But he had this great quote: "Success is not final, failure is not fatal." And I like that. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So as I listen to the podcast, I've listened to some of our members, some of our people in the community, at points in time in their lives where they thought they were done. They had the courage to continue, and they continued to take one step forward at a time. And that to me was an extraordinary life lesson for me. And I guess when I was at the Churchill War Rooms looking at a picture of Churchill, really realizing his age, realizing what he'd been through, it kind of solidified for me that for a lot of our members, they have to take pain of what's happened to them, pain of failure, pain of regret, pain of mistakes, and take that, move it with courage into progress, and learn from the challenges that they faced.
Yes, I was just thinking as we work with all kinds of members from all different practice areas, all different walks of life, geographic locations, progress often follows pain. It's not, you don't have to have pain first, but those who truly do recognize, yeah, this is kind of terrible right now, but I'm going to come out on the other end, at least in my experience, and I'd love to know if you agree, often tend to find progress even quicker than those who maybe haven't recognized the pain or have ignored the pain and maybe progressed in a different way.
I think that's great. I usually say that frustration is a byproduct of powerful goals. Now, when I've tried to explain this in the past, I've failed miserably, because if you see a very powerful goal in your mind and you're trying to work forward towards that goal, and the world's not giving you what you want, what you think you deserve, you become frustrated. You have an unmet expectation. And that frustration sometimes is where people stop, because the frustration of not getting and achieving what they want is painful enough to stop. This is where they stop, like the pain is sufficient. Really, at that point in time, what they need to do is have the courage to work through the frustration, the courage to work through the pain. And then from there, they will basically increase their courage muscle and increase their confidence capabilities. But when the frustration gets bad, it's no different than being an athlete or exercising. You're sore the next day. Frustration is a byproduct of being sore from achievement. So sometimes, if you're not frustrated, sometimes If you're not failing, sometimes if you don't feel sufficiently challenged, you've either run out of interesting goals or run out of big enough goals. And I see this a lot of time with lawyers where they sound like, going, well, I've done everything and I've achieved everything I set out to. And I said, yeah, you achieved everything you set out to when you were 30. Now you're 40. Now that you've learned everything over the past decade, what can we do that are bigger, more interesting, and great life goals and great practice goals, not achievement goals? Because now you got the car, you got the house, you've got the income that you wanted, but you really haven't done anything that I would consider great. Those are common achievement goals. And when they start to do that, they start to have to go outside a comfort zone, and it causes them stress, it causes them confusion, it causes them frustration. So I think frustration and failure is the byproduct of really interesting and powerful goals. So if you're not experiencing those things and you're not feeling some friction in your life, then I'm going to encourage you to take a step back and say, you're probably capable of bigger things and more interesting things. You're just not willing to take the emotional risk to get there.
Yes. And I think that is a wonderful segue into lesson number 5, which talks just about risk.
You know, you're right. It's a perfect segue. So lesson 5 is invest in your growth by embracing necessary risks. Now, the quote for me here is, life is inherently risky. There's only one big risk you should avoid at all costs, and that's doing nothing. And there's a quote by Dennis Waitley. If you're trying to grow in any element of your life, I don't care your age, I don't care what you're doing, you have to take a risk to get the reward. Unfortunately, that is how the game is played. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to be crazy risks, but you may have calculated risks. If you're trying to grow, you're going to either invest time, money, or both. In there, you're also going to invest emotional capital. And emotional capital is probably the most expensive. That's probably your belief, your identity in yourself, what you think your friends think about you, what you think your family thinks about you. And that belief, that investment in who you are today and who you want to be tomorrow is probably the most unstated emotional risk. You know, it's kind of, a lot of people don't see it when they're getting ready to take a risk. They see the time, they see the money, but they don't see sometimes they have to confront who they've made up themselves to be. And to get to the next level, they have to take a step back and risk who they are today to who they want to be tomorrow. And some people will be afraid to take that risk. So they'll be afraid to take a moment to redesign in their head what that next version of themselves looks like, what that future self looks like. I don't think I've seen anyone, including myself, go forward towards what they imagine a great life looks like or a great practice looks like without taking some risk. I don't think you're going to get it for free. And that's one of the things that I unfortunately think a lot of people expect. Like, I wrote it down. Don't I get it for free? This is what I want. How do I get it? It doesn't work that way, or at least it hasn't worked that way for me and pretty much everyone I've ever worked with. What are your thoughts, Val?
I think when we, first of all, I agree with you 100%. And I was thinking about members that we've come across who aren't willing to take risks at whatever point they are in their lives. What happens is all of these tolerations that they have, whether it's a team member or something in their office, or it could be a computer program, whatever it might be. But all of these things that we refer to as tolerations build up. They build up in you emotionally, they build up and impact you physically. And so the consequence of not being willing to take a risk to get to the next best version of you, that inherently is a risk. It's similar to the quote you said, doing nothing is the greatest risk, and it will catch up with you because suddenly everything that you've put up with, that you've tolerated, just built up until something breaks.
They become anchors, like emotional anchors, and they hold you in place. Like those thoughts hold you in place.
Yes.
And you realize that it's all in your head ultimately, but those thoughts hold you in place.
Yes, absolutely. And, with risk comes courage. So how would you like to move on to lesson number 6, as I think it does involve some courage?
There seems to be a thread here. Hey, Steve Riley, I just want to remind you, if you haven't registered for the summit, now is the time. Last year, the event sold out, the hotel sold out, and if you're not one of the first people in, you may not get to go. So it's November 14th and 15th, and I love the summit because we pull all the Atticus members together, whether they're working one-on-one, they're in a group program, no matter where they're at, we all get together, and we have kind of like this giant family reunion where we share cutting edge strategies, we learn from each other, we learn from innovative thinkers, and we have a great time. It's a 2-day event, and it's all about you getting inspired, you learning innovation, and you taking ideas and learning how to turn them into invoices. Ideas are only good if you can make money off them most of the time. So you want to take an idea and implement it. So day 1 is all about inspiration. Day 2 is about how to apply that inspiration in your practice and in your life. This year we have 3 fantastic speakers. Max Lugavere, who is going to talk about his thinking around his book, Genius Foods, his podcast, Genius Podcast, all about how to improve your cognitive function. We're also going to have Mike Michalowicz with his new book, All In. It's going to be focusing on how you can build and scale your law firm team. And one of my personal favorites, Robert Rose, is coming back. In fact, I think Robert is the first speaker we've ever brought back for an encore performance. Robert's going to talk to you about how to use content marketing to harness the brand of your law firm. How do you take content marketing and use it to get more better clients? It's an incredible opportunity for you to learn how to improve your brain, how to improve your team, how to improve your marketing. And those are just 3 of the keynote speakers. So I put some information in the show notes below. Click the link, register. I hope to see you there. Lesson 6. From listening to our guests, from listening to our members and having conversations, I think the most important investment that you can make in what you want is courage. What usually happens when you do invest in courage, it sparks inspiration not only in your life, but also elevates everyone in your community. The courageous acts of many members and the courageous stories that some of our guests have shared have actually inspired people they've never met before. I just came from watching some of our practice growth programs be taught in Orlando. And I got to meet probably 50 to 100 people I've never met before. It was incredible, some of the great feedback that they gave us about the Great Practice, Great Life show, but not incredible from like, oh, the show is amazing. Well, they came back and said, the people, the members have shared their stories, gave me courage, gave me inspiration, gave me insight, gave me practical tips to move forward in my life. And this is where courage creates inspiration for other people. Your courage creates inspiration for other people, and then consequently elevates the whole community. And then you get that return of investment by watching other people do courageous acts. So it's pretty cool because someone acting with courage here will inspire someone over there in a courageous way. So a lot of our guests do not appreciate that their stories have inspired other people to take courageous acts. So it's the great Helen Keller quote for me, Valerie: alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And the first act ultimately is the investment of courage by one person, authentic courage, who then inspires other people to act. And that's one of the cool things that I really learned about being part of this little podcast experience.
Well, and I think you said early on, or maybe I said it for you, but it took courage to start a podcast. You hadn't done it before. Atticus hadn't done it before, and it took courage, and the impact that you are having and that our members who participate in the podcast as guests are having is really incredible. And I have seen the spark of enthusiasm it has created in you. I have seen it from other members who have reached out to me personally about certain episodes that really hit home for them. So you are a tremendous example of this lesson that you learned, and you may not have known it going in, but it's certainly a great illustration of the lesson you just talked about.
I hope that part doesn't get edited out because I think that sounded like a compliment. I'm not sure.
We're going to have to negotiate, I guess.
I'm listening. I'm like, I think she just complimented me. I'm not really sure. I may have to mark this time down. I think that was a compliment, Valerie. I'm not sure. It might get edited out.
It is absolutely a well-earned compliment.
Thank you.
Steve, anything else on that one before we move to lesson number 7?
No, let's go to lesson 7. So lesson 7 is cultivate your life by earning greatness daily. One of the interesting things that I've learned from our episodes, and I've learned from being part of the Atticus community, is that sometimes we get trapped in the achievement race. And the achievement race is when you're running somebody else's race. What happens is you say, okay, what I'm going to do is go to college. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. And I'll have this kind of car and have this kind of house. And people will think I'm really cool. And these are the great things. But that becomes an achievement path. And achievement is where you're usually running somebody else's race. And this is where a lot of young professionals work their way up a ladder and suddenly realize, this is not the ladder I want to be on top of. This makes me feel empty. This makes me feel hollow. This makes me feel miserable. So this is where I've always argued that you can grow great practice. And a lot of lawyers think that, well, if I just grow great practice, I can buy a great life because the cash from a great practice gives me access to a great life. It doesn't really work that way. Greatness is a earned experience, and greatness is what it looks like to you, not to me, not to you, Valerie. What greatness looks like is what it looks like to you. So I always keep saying that greatness is earned. You don't get it for free because you have to learn and cultivate what greatness means to you. So you have to actually attune your mindset. You have to look inward. You have to ask yourself, what does a great life look like to me? And what's a great practice? And a lot of our members have radically different perceptions of what a great practice and what a great life looks like. Some are delighted to have built a great big organization, 80, 100 employees, making millions of dollars a year in income, being influential. Some are just delighted to have autonomy over their life, make a good living, but really invest time in things they care about, whether it's charity, family, what have you. So you can't compare those two people and say, that lawyer's winning, that lawyer's not winning, or that team leader's winning, that one's not winning. And it's hard because as achievers, we're trained to compare ourselves to other people. In the old quote by Theodore Roosevelt, comparison's a thief of joy. I try and encourage our lawyers not to compare themselves with each other, but to get really clear what greatness looks like to them and play for what a great life looks like. In this day and age of instant everything, I have to remind my daughter, I have to remind my son, I have to remind myself that greatness is not an Instagram moment. It's something that you earn every single day by working on what your vision of your life looks like, what your why looks like. So for me, it's not a one-time achievement. It's a lifelong pursuit of consistent behavior, character, and action. Does that make sense to you?
It does. And what I'm hearing is it's so important for us to understand, first and foremost, what great means to us. And that's not always something easy to do. I remember the first time you challenged me a little bit on that to look at what my lifetime legacy would be, what I wanted my lifetime legacy to be. I couldn't tell you. I struggled for a long, it took me months to be able to really do that. It is not something easy because we do get stuck in that trap of comparing our lives to others' lives or comparing our achievements to someone else's. And I was 100% stuck in that trap. Because no one had really challenged me to say, well, what is really great for you? What does that mean for you? Not what anybody else thinks. So I think that is a really profound lesson that you're sharing with us.
I learned that achievement means I'm playing somebody else's game. Greatness means I'm playing my own game. So if I'm trying to work my way up a corporate ladder, a law firm ladder, a government ladder, and I'm following the path laid out, more than likely I'm following a path of achievement laid out by somebody else. I haven't taken the time, nor have I embraced the stark terror of total accountability for my own life and said, wow, my future is my property. What would great look like for me a decade from now? Which makes a lot of people terrified. It's easier to run the achievement race because you know how to win, but doesn't mean you're going to be happy. It doesn't mean that you're going to feel like your life has mattered. It doesn't feel like you're going to live a lifetime legacy. This is one of the things I love about our members in our community is that so many of them are trying to cultivate what greatness means to them and play for that. So one of the things I appreciate that you're providing to us as a leader and our CEO is supporting, and not necessarily how to make a ton of money, but really how to make a life that's meaningful and impactful to you.
Thank you for that. And I think, again, you've created a wonderful segue into your next lesson if you're ready for number 8.
It's funny how this keeps unfolding this way. I didn't mean for it to unfold this way, but it seems to have a natural segue to it.
It does.
It's kind of funny. Lesson number 8, embrace your great practice, great life journey. Now, as a leadership team, one of the things that you've done for us as an organization is talk about playing an infinite game. An infinite game comes from Simon Sinek, the author, and he does a great TED Talk, I think, on the infinite game. And the infinite game, I'll tell you what, why don't you talk and explain what the infinite game is, and I'll add my interpretation in a moment. Would that be fair?
Sure. So Simon Sinek is using business as the analogy for an infinite game, playing a game that does not have an end. And he compares that with a finite game, like a basketball game. It has a beginning, an end, and a clear winner and a clear loser. In business, there is no winner or loser. There is no end unless you have a finite mindset and you are constantly comparing yourself to a competitor in your space and believing that you are losing. And he says, when we're playing an infinite game, we recognize we're in this for the long haul. We are building a business that is going to be around far after we are gone. And there's going to be times that we're ahead and times that we're behind as compared to our competitors. But we are in this for something for the long haul. There's no end to that game of business.
It's important to me when we talk to lawyers, because most lawyers come to us saying, I want to make more money. And I try and tell them, well, the first thing we need to do is get clear on the why you want to make more money, not necessarily for survival, not necessarily for showing off achievement status, but why, what are you going to do? Money, generally for me, money has to have a purpose. I just can't make money for the sake of money. I can't make money for the sake of getting a new car. I have to have a purpose behind the money. And I think when I was in college, I got influenced by the writings of Friedrich Nietzsche. And he has this great quote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." For me personally, the infinite game for our members, our community, is what's your lifetime legacy look like? What are you trying to do with your law firm? What are you trying to do with your life so you can really play that game, that infinite game? I think it was probably episode 50 or so that I realized that Great Practice, Great Life wasn't really a company brand promise. I realized that Great Practice, Great Life was more or less congealing and pulling together a movement of lawyers that want to live differently than the average attorney. The average lawyer just wants to work, retire, die early or die at the desk, whatever they want to do. But the people that we're attracting to be part of our community are playing a game where they really want to make a difference. So we were starting to see more and more of a movement. And I think what's interesting for me was come out of the podcast that I've got to listen to other people describe the movement and their particular journey inside the context of the Great Practice, Great Life movement. Now, I think it sounds strange to call it a movement sometimes, but as I look out in our communities, I look at the people, I look at how the rope teams are working, I look at how our coaches are supporting people, I look at how the resource advisors are supporting people, and they're not supporting our members because it's their job. They're supporting our members because they believe in their why, that they're there to help everyone in the legal community have a great practice and a great life, regardless of the role inside of that organization. Whether it's a not-for-profit, for-profit, it doesn't matter. Our community, as Atticus as a community, is rallied behind that. And I'm seeing this really kind of coalesce inside the Atticus membership at large. Have you seen that? I mean, what do you think?
I have. And this idea, this movement of having a great practice and a great life and thinking about it as a journey is really encouraging people to have an infinite mindset as well, as opposed to a fixed mindset. And when you have that infinite mindset, you have the ability to look into the future, to think about what's really important. And you do this beautifully when we've taught together and helped members think through your lifetime legacy, because you really want to be focused on that so that everything that you do now is in support of what's really important to you. And having watched others tackle this for the first time, it's really incredibly rewarding to watch attorneys or team members kind of wrestle with this, and then suddenly they get it, because they've had the space and the permission to think outside of the next 90 days or to think outside of the office and what is really, really important to them. So I think that it is a movement. And yeah, I agree. When we first were talking about that, I thought, wow, are we going to have to go outside with signs, and get people to join the Volkswagen bus? What does this mean? But it's not.
I haven't thought of it quite that way, but it might be T-shirts in our future. I don't know. I'm not shaving my head, though. Not yet.
But I do. Those concepts are all intertwined, and they are all around helping people get focused on, again, what a great life looks like, what a great practice looks like, that those can happen together. Having courage. Truly, every lesson that you've laid out for us so far really does. One builds off the other. And all of these lessons have to come together to truly help us move forward in having that great practice, and more importantly, that great life.
The Atticus company, and I say that broadly, from leadership to the most recent person hired, which I believe we just hired somebody today, but I was going to say I think is Grace, might be the second most recent person hired, are behind the belief and behind the support of everybody having a great life, great practice. And our goal is to reshape the legal industry, not reshape the world, like politicians, but really reshape and give lawyers an alternative way of practicing. Because we know if the lawyers have an alternative way of practicing, then as leaders, they can create the alternative way for their teams to practice, and alternative ways to support their clients and whatever issues they have, then alternative ways to shift and support their community. It's interesting to see a happy, joyous lawyer as a leader versus a burned out, tired, cranky lawyer as a leader. The one is far more effective than the other. So I always think about my favorite lawyer. And I'm going to just use this as an example, and maybe a stretch, Valerie. My favorite lawyer of all time, and a lot of people don't realize this, is Mahatma Gandhi. So Gandhi was actually an attorney. He was a barrister trained in England. And when he came to India, he got involved in political movements and embraced particular elements of Hinduism and got behind nonviolence as a way of changing the interaction of the Indian people with the British government that ruled them at the time. Now, I love the fact that he was first and foremost a lawyer, tried to advocate as a lawyer, but actually expanded his mindset and expanded his thinking and embraced trying to make a far greater change than one they could do through the courtroom. The level of our thinking today creates the ceiling of our behavior tomorrow. And I love thinking about him as a heroic figure. Now, I don't see myself leading a movement like that, But I do look at him from the perspective that how he changed his thinking, how he changed his approach is something all of us can learn from. It's something that all of us can support. It's something that all of us can appreciate as human beings. Hopefully that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. So that, Steve, that was a big one. Lesson number 8. Ready to move on to lesson 9?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Lesson 9. Lesson 9 is recognize that everyone is helping you win, even when you don't know it. So, what I mean by that is kind of like doing today's episode with you. I'm kind of like a pilot. I get a flight plan, I get an instrument, I get a co pilot, which is Grace, and I get to fly the plane for a little bit of time. When the episode's over, people go, wow, that was great, or you could do better, or whatever the case may be. But just like a pilot flying a plane from one city to another, there's a whole bunch of people involved in that flight that people don't see. So the people that are behind this podcast that are really the ones that make this happen are everything from Rachel, who's our head of our marketing department, our entire leadership team, Mark Power, Sean, McNallis, Valerie, yourself, Glenn Finch, Kristen. All of these people as leaders have helped push Danny and his team at Emerald, which is really the company that helped us become our podcast coach and help produce the podcast. My daughter, Grace Riley, has joined and she's editing and doing the video. She's a critical component of this, but nobody gets to see her. Robert Rose, who is the initial inspiration, is cheering us on and encouraging us and coaching us and pushing us. He's the one who pushed us from just using the podcast to going to YouTube to making it a show. Now, we've had a lot of practice advisors. Glenn Gutek, Daniel Struna, Aaron Rothart, Lori have all been on multiple times trying to help, support, push. The resource advisor teams are all trying to give us guests. They're always trying to give us ideas. They're always trying to give us support. All of the practice advisors, the adjunct practice advisors have all been on in some way, shape, or form, supporting us. The team leaders that have been on supporting us. And there's probably 20 other people that I'm not mentioning. So none of this could happen without them. While I get to fly the plane, I'm not the one doing the flight plan. I'm not the one loading the plane. I'm not the one making sure the plane is going to fly safely. I'm not the one doing air traffic control. So while some people are very, very gracious to me and saying, hey, great job on the podcast, it's kind of hard to say, I do 5%. Like I do a great 5%. Believe me, I'm like very happy with my 5%. But, you know what I'm saying? Like I like to think that my 5% is good, but 95% is being done by other people. And so the reason I really like this one is that sometimes in life, you just don't think that other people are trying to get you to win. And a lot of people are just somewhat blinded by the fact that they have a whole amount of people behind them trying to get them to win. And inside our community, inside of Atticus, we have a whole company of people that are there to help our community have a great life and great practice. They're there to help you win. And sometimes you just don't see it. You just get kind of tunnel vision. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's one of the things I've learned. I get a lot more credit than I deserve because so much work is done by other people. And it just sometimes makes me look good. And I hope to God I don't mess it up, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I appreciate you being aware of that and sharing, hey, yeah, this is something I've learned through this journey, and recognizing how much it takes, behind the scenes. And this, it wasn't necessarily in one of your lessons, but I think that I know that it's intertwined in everything you do, and why you're able to see things the way you do. And this is this idea of gratitude. Because if you don't take time and give yourself space to be grateful and be specific about what you're grateful for, you would never recognize what you've recognized with this lesson. And I know you take your gratitude practice very seriously. Would you care to just spend maybe a minute talking about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, good question, one that I did not anticipate. Uh, I have learned for myself personally that one of the most important habits that I can do to maintain a level of happiness in my own life is to do what I call the big fig gratitude practice, begin in gratitude, finish in gratitude. So, and there's studies that show that if you write, it has a far greater impact on your brain and on your emotions than if you think. So I like every morning to write 5 to 10 things that I'm grateful for in that morning. In the evening, as I start to wrap up, whether it's in my Great Life Focuser or at home, I'll write somewhere between 5 to 10 things that I'm grateful for that day. Because usually the way I'm wired, and I don't think any of our members are wired this way, I go into the day with a complete expectation of the 50,000 things I'm going to do that day. And then I have to narrow it down to three most important things today. And this podcast is one of my three most important things today. But if I don't take a moment to appreciate my life, if I don't take a moment to appreciate what I did on that day, I can get consumed by the habit of looking at what I missed. So I'm trying to reverse the current. My practice is trying to reverse the current of being a somewhat overachiever who did not achieve everything I thought I should achieve that day. So the gratitude is a way of softening. And what I've discovered, this is interesting. So this is just my discovery. Other people can speak to what they've learned about this. But for me, when I practice gratitude, gratitude leads to happiness. And happiness, when you practice happiness, leads to joy. And when you're joyful, you annoy a lot of people who are not joyful. I've learned this as well. But it's a practice. So I don't think people are naturally happy. I don't think your brain, based on everything I've read, is designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you alive. So happiness, joy, and gratitude for me are learned experiences. And the anchor to that is habit and practices that work over time. Now, that's just me. I have to work that way. Some people are just naturally wake up bubbly. Some people naturally wake up, joyful. Some people naturally wake up in a great space. I am not that creature. I wake up in a somewhat less than joyous mood. And so the gratitude practice shifts my mindset, shifts my attitude, and shifts my thinking.
Thank you for sharing that, Steve, because we all go through different phases of life where we feel like, oh, I can't catch a break, and that's when we're focusing outside of ourselves on external things, doing things to us. And having a gratitude practice or a gratitude habit to fall back on can often help lift us out of that and stop feeling like things are happening to me, and being able to stop for a moment, think about all the wonderful things you have to be grateful in your life, can often help push people past some of those feelings of I just can't do this. The world is against me, whatever those negative feelings may be. So thank you. I know you weren't expecting that, but you handled it beautifully. And if you're ready, I think we're ready for number 10.
I'd like to do number 10, and then I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, a summary of all of them, because I discovered something in writing these up and putting them together that I want to share that I think is kind of fun.
Please do.
Lesson 10. It's all about you, the listener. You are the heroes that make this journey work. This ultimately, for me, has been driven by the audience. They're the ones who make this journey of our little podcast possible. There's this great proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And one of the fascinating things is that all of our listeners are part of a dedicated conversation of playing the game of great practice, great life, and they inspire each other to play better. Here is an interesting statistic. The average podcast has a consumption rate of 27%. Now, that didn't mean anything to me at first, but what that means is that of the listeners, 27% of them listen to an episode all the way through. Now, here's what's really remarkable about the people that are listening, the people that are part of this audience, is that they're incredibly supportive. And consequently, our consumption rate is freakishly high. Our consumption rate is 3 times the average. We are basically between 80 to 90% consumption rate, depending on the episode, which anyone who's in the podcasting industry, when we tell them that, they're like, oh my gosh, how are you guys doing that? And I said, we're not doing a thing. We are not doing a thing. Our listeners are doing it. Our listeners are supporting each other. And I've always joked with you, and I've joked with our coaches, that our listeners are kind of like the Jedi Knights in Star Wars. They're off to big things. They're out to change the world. They're out to change their world. They're out to do things. And we're kind of like Yoda. And our job is to guide, coach, and support them. We're not the heroes. They are. And you can see that by the intensity by which our audience listens to each episode, because they're supporting each member that's been on here, each guest. People are supporting them by listening and cheering them on all the way through the episode. So while it may sound like that consumption rate's about us, it's really not. It's about the audience and the intensity and the support and the love that the audience is giving each guest. So for me, the heroes of this incredible podcast is ultimately the people that are listening to these episodes that are supporting each other and cheering each other on.
I think that's beautiful. Absolutely. And Steve, you mentioned a summary. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready. So what I did, I was inspired years ago by a book I read. And afterwards I said, these are better than lessons. What I'm going to do, and if you want a copy of this, we'll put a way to give you a copy of this, probably in the show notes. But for fun, I took these lessons and turned them to laws. So I'm going to give these to you and just for fun, read them to you and see what you think. But they're kind of fun because after doing this, I was like, wow, I should write these down somewhere because these are pretty good. These are things that I could live by if I wanted to live by these. So here's number 1. Always strive to make your next performance better than your last. Doesn't matter what you're doing, what you did yesterday or what you did a few minutes ago, do the next one better. Number 2, always hear criticism as coaching for growth. It's kind of a good thing to live by. If people are giving you feedback, you might as well listen to it from the perspective that they're trying to help, not trying to hurt. Number 3, always learn from everyone by tuning into their unique perspective. Everybody has a different journey in their life, and everybody can offer a different contribution to your journey. Sometimes we don't take the time to listen. We don't take the time to hear. Sometimes we don't take the time to learn. And that's one of the things I've learned from the privilege of being in this particular role. 4, always turn pain into progress by learning from every challenge. You stay with the pain until you learn from the pain. If you don't transform the pain into a lesson, it just stays pain. So if you have pain anywhere in your life, take a moment, look and say, okay, what is the lesson that I can learn from this pain and move it forward? Because until you transform the pain into a lesson, your brain, your heart will continue to hold on to the pain. It will continue to haunt you. So take it, transform it, and move it into a lesson. Always invest in growth by embracing necessary risks. You can't get with what you want without taking some form of risk. Number 6, always invest in courage. It sparks inspiration and elevates us all. Your courage will inspire somebody else. Their courage will inspire you. Once you invest the courage, it's like a ripple in a pond. You throw a big rock in, it's going to cause a ripple. It's going to hit the side of that pond and ripple back to you. Someone will throw in a bigger rock, a bigger act of courage, and inspire you. But courage always inspires human beings to play at a different level. It elevates us all. So invest in your own courage. Support other people that are taking courageous acts. 7, always cultivate your life by earning greatness daily. Now note that I said daily. Greatness is a daily act. It's a character act. It's a habit building act. It's something that you're doing every day to improve who you are and how you perform. Number 8, always embrace the great practice, great life journey. Now, for us, this is an infinite game. This is the why that we're supporting as an organization. I'm going to encourage you that if you're part of our audience, you maybe have perhaps bought into the possibility that you're playing a great practice, great life game. If you are, embrace it as a journey and say, okay, what's my great practice, great life journey going to be? Whatever that may be. And if you don't have a great practice, then just play for a great life journey. But the question becomes, how do you do that? How do you embrace it? How do you embrace that infinite game that you want to play? Number 9, always recognize that everyone's helping you, even when you don't see it. This is an interesting one for me, Valerie, because I think a lot of people in life, myself included, are blind to the fact that a lot of people are trying to help me win one way or the other. And it's kind of a gratitude practice for me. Everybody's trying to help me win in some way, shape, or form. I think this is where luck comes from. If you start looking that you're a lucky person and you think that luck happens to you, you find luck everywhere. I think if you believe that everyone's trying to help you win, you will find everyone trying to help you win. 10, always make yourself part of a community where everyone is playing a game that inspires you to play better. This is what our listeners are doing. This is what our audience is doing. This is what our members are doing. They're part of a community where everyone is playing in a way that helps you play better. And I think that is the core of our audience. They're supporting each other, they're listening, they're encouraging each other, and they're trying to collaborate to help each one play better because they know ultimately the stronger the community is, the larger the community is, the more we're all supported by the strength of that community. So those are my summary. If you're interested, we'll put something in the show notes where you can access this summary if you want it. We'll memorialize it in some way, shape, or form. But I'm printing it out because I like it. It's worked for me in preparing for this. Valerie, any thoughts for you?
Just thank you, Steve. These were really, really great lessons. You were vulnerable with us as you were going through those, and just the fact that you said, I want to share the lessons that I've learned from doing 100 podcast shows that humility. It shows that you are living this lifetime journey of growth and having an open mindset, remaining curious, figuring out how you can achieve greatness daily. So I think it's really important for you to realize that how you are showing these lessons, how you're living these lessons in what you do on this podcast for our members and for this company, and also as my friend. And so I don't want to forget to thank you for that as well.
Thank you. It's, in retrospect, it was 100 great podcasts. It was 100 conversations with amazing human beings that are trying to make a difference for other human beings. While they were contained inside a medium we call a podcast, it's really 100 people that are trying to help other people in whatever way they can. So that really, for me, ultimately is the big takeaway. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Valerie, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Thank you, Steve, for letting me come on and have this conversation with you. I always take so much from our conversations. So thank you.
And Valerie, thank you for being here. Thank you for the leadership that you continue to exhibit. Thank you for the support. And thank you for all the coaching that you've given me over the years on how I can be better at so many different things. With that, we will wrap up this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, please don't hesitate to give us feedback. And thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.